Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome. My name is Janelle, and I discuss mental health, self-development, and everything in between. Let's get started. I must have done something wrong. There has to be something that I did that made me a target. It was only me, not my brother, not my sister. They weren't treated that well, but there was a special type of hell reserved for me. How many of you can resonate with that statement? When it comes to complex PTSD, we are constantly racking our brains trying to figure out what we did to cause the lack of love from our parents, family constantly blaming us for everything that went wrong, being called names, and being punished for no reason, or being targeted by predators. To help you move through self-blame, shame, fear, and rejection, and to place the blame where it belongs, we have to grieve. It helps us to navigate the pain and developmental arrest we experienced during childhood. So grief helps us to mourn the loss of our childhood due to growing up in a complex PTSD-inducing home, and it also helps us to resolve intense feelings that stem from emotional flashbacks. Pete Walker wrote the amazing book called Complex PTSD, From Surviving to Thriving, and he also wrote the book The Tao of Fully Feeling Grief, Harvesting Forgiveness Out of Blame. I think I pronounced that correctly. In this video, I touch on Pete Walker's approach to the 4 processes of grieving, which are angering, crying, verbal ventilation, and feeling. And these components are all an essential part of healing while introducing self-protection, self-compassion, and self-love, among other developmental components that were stunted in our childhood. In Pete's book, he said that grieving alleviates fear and shame. Fear is the death of feeling safe, and shame is the death of acceptance and self-worth. I want to call a timeout for a second, and I want to say that for those who are watching this video who have experienced a trauma-filled childhood, I am so sorry for what you guys have experienced, and you deserved so much better. And I pray that you continue to find hope and peace on your journey. You deserve to tell your story, and there is so much life out there for you, and I'm rooting for every single one of you. Pain doesn't have to be your forever story. And I also want to mention that we all have different experiences, and this information isn't representative of everyone who has experience with complex PTSD. Pete Walker broke down 4 steps of grieving, and the first one is anger. I always mention to my clients the effectiveness of anger, and anger plays a pivotal role as we finally realize that injustice has been done to us. Oftentimes I've heard, Janelle, I don't want to get angry like my mom or my dad. However, the anger you are trying to express isn't about being abusive. It's about developing self-protection that was needed and denied to refrain you from saying no and setting boundaries. So perhaps you were made to feel like your anger was the worst emotion in the world to express because that was a way that they had control and manipulation over you. If you expressed anger as a kid or a teenager, you may have been punished, called selfish, or had love taken away to teach you a lesson. When you tap into your anger now, you have the power to protect your younger self and scream at the abuser over all the atrocities that have been done to you. No more hiding or minimizing your voice because of fear. Anger will challenge the inner critic that tells you that you're to blame. You're lazy, you're just like your mom and dad. Dad left the family because you were such a handful, you're shameful, or you're worthless. Through anger, you no longer direct blame and hatred towards yourself for what you experienced. Pete said, we don't have to direct our anger towards our living parent. He said we can direct our anger towards our internalized parent from the past, which is our inner critic. He did say that there are exceptions to this, one being that your parent is still very much abusive. He speaks more about that in his book, The Tao of Fully Feeling Grief. Another reason why anger is so foundational is because it helps to reduce our toxic shame. So Sometimes we're shamed for not being a good son or not being a good daughter, and we hide the truth from others about our past out of fear of judgment or blame. And we sit in this toxic shame of self-hatred, and we see ourselves as damaged goods. We question what we could have done differently to make our parents happy and to make them love us. Remember, you're no longer that kid stuck in a house of horrors, and you no longer need your parent for basic survival. Anger gives power back to your voice. And Pete mentioned that angering can be done with a trusted friend or therapist who validates you. He did say that over time, angering needs to be done in the privacy of your own psyche. I wrote this example of what anger can sound like. How dare you tell me that I was good for nothing when I was only 5 years old? I was a kid. How dare you tell me I was a burden because I asked for school supplies or because I was too young to use the stove to make my own dinner? What type of parent says these things to their child? I am enough, and I was never a burden. I believed everything you said, but no more. You were an awful parent to ever treat me the way you did. How could you? I'm enough, I'm loving, I'm deserving, and you don't get to have access to me anymore. This is an example of something you can write to help tap into your anger. Of course, feel free to say and use colorful language and tailor it to your own lived experience. Pete Walker's second step to grieving is crying. I'll sometimes do an imagery exercise with some of my clients, and their tears allow them to mourn and feel sorrow for their younger self. It also allows them to simultaneously tap into their anger. It's a release of pain while introducing self-protection and self-compassion. As per Pete, when we greet our own tears with self-compassion, crying awakens our developmentally arrested instinct of self-compassion. So we learn to self-soothe and we treat ourselves with kindness. Crying and anger go hand in hand because it allows us to be self-protective and to realize injustice has been done while validating our tears with the love and tenderness we never received growing up. Pete Walker mentioned that we need both crying and angering in order to release the pain of the various types of abandonment. I've often come across people who have a hard time with crying, and perhaps your inner critic maybe it still has a very firm grip on you, so it's important to work on shrinking the inner critic. Pete mentions that we can engage in belly breathing and focusing on our breath, which also may help with tears. And he also mentioned holotropic rebirthing, which uses a special breathing technique to help free us from stuck emotion. Pete's third step to grief is verbal ventilation. In order to release painful emotions, you have to speak or write it out. It is liberating and powerful because the information is no longer stored in the body and in the mind. Verbal ventilation can merge the right and the left brain in order to think and feel at the same time. So continuously repeating the process of verbal ventilation could also help with managing emotional flashbacks. When someone is experiencing an emotional flashback, they are stuck in the right brain, which is emotion oriented, and they don't always have access to the cognitive left brain. Some people can be very cerebral and intellectualize traumatic events in a very robotic manner, which is very understandable. Pete does mention that recollection without effect produces poor results. So the goal is to create a healthy balance between drawing on emotions and your intellect. I've often gravitated towards the writing exercise in the book, Mothers Who Can't Love. It's broken down into 4 components, and the first one is, this is what you did to me. The second one is, this is how I felt about it at the time. The third one is, this is how it has impacted my life. And the fourth one is, this is what I want from you now. This is a very powerful writing tool that can help with verbal ventilation. And you're essentially combining all the grieving components into one letter. So there's angering, crying, verbal ventilation, and the last one is feeling, which we will get to in just a moment. Keep in mind though that you don't have to give this letter to your parent if you don't want to. This is about you releasing the shame, rejection, and feelings of abandonment that has been projected onto you. So once you have written the letter, read it out loud in a safe environment, and I suggest seeking out a trauma-informed therapist or a support group, as writing this letter and also engaging in verbal ventilation can trigger an emotional flashback. The last process of grieving is feeling. So Pete Walker describes feeling as the active process of staying present to internal emotional experiences without reacting. For example, let's say that you're experiencing sadness from your past, like a memory just pops up. Instead of trying to ignore it with substance misuse, watching television, scrolling on social media, or beating yourself up for still feeling sad, you're going to sit with your sadness without judgment, resistance, or without acting out. According to Pete, as a grieving process, feelings involves consciously reversing the learned survival mechanism of clamping down on pain to banish it from our awareness. He provided an example of a little child who was constantly punished for expressing their internal feelings. And they learned to be afraid of their inner emotions, so they would tighten their muscles in their body in an effort to banish their feelings so they no longer have them in existence. And sometimes we also hold our breath. That child is trying to protect themselves from punishment while internalizing that having feelings are bad and something to be afraid of. And as an adult, you're now allowing yourself to feel in your body without fear, without judgment, and without punishment. So no more resistance, you are acknowledging the pain and allowing it to eventually dissolve. Pete also spoke about the connection between the emotions and the physical as a way to feel. And one method that can help with the practice of feeling is paying attention to our body's physical sensation. Is there tightness in your chest? Is there cramping in your neck? Do you feel like there's a lump in your throat? The practice of the emotion and physical connection keeps us present with our feelings as we simply acknowledge and experience the sensation in a gentle manner. So Pete did mention that in the beginning, it's okay to emote our feelings because strong feelings are likely to arise. When we let go of searching for the answers within us, we are left with the painful truth that we were born into a family where love did not exist, acceptance did not exist, safety did not exist, and you didn't have a chance to thrive and develop into the person you could have been because you were stuck in survival mode and you experienced developmental arrest. There was pain, heartache, tears, sadness, and then you might think, why me? The truth is, there is no answer for why me. Some may call it luck. Others may say that you needed to be the one to break the generational cycle, or sometimes bad things happen to good people. Whatever the reason, I don't think an answer can satisfy the why. Going through the 4 stages of grief is an effective way to alleviate shame and fear. Remember that healing takes time and it looks different for everyone. So practice self-kindness, self-compassion, and tell the inner critic to get lost. I will do a more in-depth video on the inner critic and how it can hold up the healing process. Pete also shared an exercise in his book that will help you feel and grieve through pain. Check it out in the description box below. If you've made it to the end of my video, thanks for watching. I encourage you all to explore more resources on complex PTSD and trauma recovery. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comment section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share my video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.